The dog stopped barking at the fence. That was the first thing. Just quit one morning, like something had drained the voice out of him. He didn't whimper or growl or chase shadows like before. Just stared out toward the low ridge, ears stiff, tail tucked close to his belly. I remember because it was the same morning the frost didn't melt, even when the sun touched it. It just clung to the fence post like ash. I'd had Duke near on 7 years. Never seen him act like that. He was a good cattle dog, quiet but alert, smarter than most men I knew, and kinder too. That morning, though, he wouldn't leave the barn. Stood stiff at the open door, peering out like something was moving in the light. Something I couldn't see. His body trembled like a taut wire, but he made no sound. Not a bark, not a whine. Only watched. I figured it was coyotes, maybe a stray mountain cat. We'd had dry seasons before, and predators got bold when the land cracked. But even when I stepped out with a rifle, Duke didn't follow. He didn't growl. Just stayed there, staring across the pasture where the old cottonwoods swayed in a wind I couldn't feel. The air had that stillness I don't much like. No bird sounds. No bugs either, now that I thought of it. Just a breeze ruffling the frost on the grass. Quiet as breath. When I knelt to check Duke's paws, I noticed the dirt around the barn door was darker than usual. Damp, but we hadn't had rain in over a month. He didn't want to go near it. Wouldn't even step over the line of shadows stretching out from the barn's beams. And when I leaned down, I caught a whiff of something. Not rot exactly, but something stale, old, like cellar air when it's been shut for too long. Faint, but wrong. I brushed it off. Dogs spook sometimes. Maybe he caught wind of something in the night. Foxes, maybe. I saddled up before breakfast, rode the south perimeter to check the fence. But the land felt uneasy. Not wrong. Not yet, but like it was holding its breath. On the ridge, the wind kicked up hard. Real sharp and sudden. Blew my hat clear off and spooked the mare under me. She danced, snorted, eyes wide. She'd been steady ever since I broke her. Never once gave me trouble. But now she jerked her head like she smelled something sour and bolted a few steps toward the edge of the bluff before I reined her in. And that was the second thing. That night, Duke didn't eat. Just laid in the barn, curled tight and shaking. I thought he might be sick, but there was no heat in his belly. No injury either. I left a lamp burning near the door. Not for him. For me, I guess. Because I didn't like the way the dark stretched out past the pasture. I dreamed of hooves that night. Not horses, but something heavier, slower. The kind of rhythm that sinks into the bones. In the dream, I stood outside, and the frost had crept up the side of the house, covering the windows like lace. And something was moving on the other side. Something tall and still, just waiting. Next morning, I found Duke outside the barn, muddy and panting. He dug a hole along the eastern wall, deep, almost 3 feet down. He was covered in dirt and blood. His own, I think, one paw was raw from scraping. But he wouldn't let me near the hole. He stood over like a grave and wouldn't move, eyes locked on mine, chest heaving. I called to him. I begged him. He just stood there. That was when I started to feel it. Not fear exactly, more like the sense that something had shifted. Something I hadn't noticed in time. The way you can walk past a room 100 times, and then one day, it's quiet in a way it shouldn't be. And the dog knew. He knew it first. The next morning, Duke was gone. Not just from the barn, from the property. I found his tracks leading east, out past the fence line, deep into the arroyo that cuts through the edge of the grazing field. No blood, no struggle. Just a deep print of his pads in a half-frozen mud, and the long drag of his tail sweeping behind. He hadn't run. He'd walked slow like something called him. I whistled low and sharp across the field. Then again, nothing came back but the sound of brittle grass twitching in the wind. My voice felt smaller than usual, like the air itself didn't want to carry it. Like it got swallowed before it could echo. The cows hadn't moved from the western slope. Not since dawn. That was the third thing. Normally, by sunrise, they'd be clustered around the creek or pushing against the wire near the north gate. But this morning they stood dead still, all 23 heads pointed in the same direction, toward the cottonwoods at the far end of the field, like a church congregation listening for something. One of them, the brindled cow I called Merrily, started to low, not loud, just steady, a long rhythmic moan that rose and dipped with the wind. Then she pawed at the dirt, slow and deliberate, like she was uncovering something. I'd seen her do that once before during a late freeze, when her calf had gotten buried in snow. That time she'd bellowed, so loud the neighbors came running. This time, though, no panic, just that low sound and the scrape of hoof against soil. I climbed the fence, boots crunching on frozen grass. The sky was clear, no clouds, no birds. Not a single gull or crow in sight. Even the crows were gone. I crossed the pasture with a shotgun slung over my shoulder. Didn't know why I took it. Habit, maybe. Felt strange walking out there, without Duke trailing behind. As I approached, the wind shifted, sudden and sharp like it had changed his mind halfway through a breath. It came from the east, from the ridge, and it carried with it that same stale odor I caught at the barn 2 days back. Not rot, older than that, like dried bones and damp cloth left sealed in a chest for 100 years. Merrily backed away when I neared the cottonwoods. Her eyes rolled toward me, but she didn't meet my gaze. None of the cows did. They turned as one and slowly drifted away, not in panic, more like a tide pulling back. I stood there, unsure what I expected to find. The grass was patchy here, thin from years of shallow roots. The wind died suddenly, and for a moment, everything just stopped. No sound, no insects, not even the whisper of branches rubbing together. The silence pressed against me, thick and round. I could hear my own breath. I could hear my pulse in my ears. Then I felt it, not on my skin, underneath it, like static just before a storm, but not from the sky, from the earth, a slow buzzing in the soles of my boots, up through the bones of my legs. I crouched down and placed my palm on the soil. It was warm, not sun-warm, deeper, like breath rising from something buried alive. That's when the mare screamed. It echoed across the pasture like gunfire. Horses don't scream often, but when they do, it cuts through everything. I turned on instinct, heart knocking once against my ribs. She was back at the ranch house, rearing high, kicking at her stall wall like she'd seen fire. Her eyes were wide with white. I dropped the shotgun and ran. When I reached her, she was sweating foam, streaked in dust, eyes wild. She wouldn't let me near her. I opened the gate slow, whispering calm, but she bolted straight past me, crashing to the fence like it was paper. She ran east. Same direction Duke went. Same direction the wind had come from. By nightfall, I still hadn't found either of them. The air didn't cool like it should have. Instead, it stayed heavy, like the sky was leaning too close. Even the stars looked wrong, not missing, just duller, like they were behind a veil. I lit a lantern and sat on the porch. I listened for frogs, for coyotes, for anything, but the night stayed still, and I realized I hadn't heard my own heartbeat in hours. I set out before dawn, lantern in one hand, saddlebags packed with jerky and a flask. The mare was still gone. Duke, too. I didn't call for them anymore, not because I'd given up, but because something told me sound didn't carry right out there, not east of the fence, not toward that ridge where the cottonwoods thinned and the ground started to breathe. I took the old trail that ran behind the arroyo. It hadn't been ridden in years. Last time I'd gone that way, I'd been chasing a coyote that had taken one of the calves. Now the path felt different, not overgrown, just older, like the land had curled back into itself, waiting. The morning was warm, too warm for October. The frost hadn't come back, and the smell followed me, that strange, stale air like mothballs and rusted hinges. I kept catching it in waves, stronger as I rode east. I dismounted at the line of split stone where the ground flattens before the rise. The grass ended there. Not died, just stopped. A sharp cut across the land, like someone had drawn a boundary. I tied the reins to a mesquite stump and crossed on foot. My boots touched bare earth, but it wasn't dusted or cracked. It was smooth, dark, packed hard like it had been burned, but there were no scorch marks, no ash, just heat, trapped and low, humming under my soles like the memory of fire. I followed the pull of it, not because I wanted to, but because my legs moved easier that direction, as if something had swept the resistance away. The wind died. Even the light felt wrong, a dim, yellow hush that dulled the color of everything it touched. My shadow stretched longer than it should have. Too long for the sun's position. Too still. That's when I saw the shapes. Not carved, not etched, just formed. Subtle patterns in the dirt, like something had pressed down from inside the earth. Circles mostly, not perfect but deliberate. They rippled outward, like the rings left when a drop hit still water, only frozen in soil. There were dozens of them, overlapping, interwoven. In the center, the ground dipped shallow like a dried-out pond, and at the bottom of that hollow, I found the bones. Cattle, mostly. I saw a twisted rib cage, a half-crushed skull. They were arranged strangely, not scattered like by scavengers, but stacked in spirals. One bleached femur lodged into the curve of a vertebra like a spoke in a wheel, and there were smaller bones, too. Bird, maybe, rabbit, something delicate, all turned inward toward the center. I stepped closer, and the air grew dense. Not hotter, heavier, like altitude sickness, only without the height. My ears popped. I knelt, fingertips brushing the dirt, and a jolt ran up my arm like static. I didn't cry out, just stood slow and steady, heart kicking hard against my ribs. Then I saw the tree. At the far edge of the hollow stood a cottonwood, or what was left of one. Its trunk was burned black, hollowed straight down the middle like lightning had struck clean through. But the bark wasn't split. No charring, just that deep, smooth hollow, dark as pitch. And around its base, the soil pulsed faintly, not visibly, but I felt it, like a second heartbeat, quiet and slow and older than anything I'd ever known. That's when the wind returned. But it didn't move the grass, didn't stir the trees. It moved through me, inside my clothes, inside my mouth. Tasted like iron and winter apples, like old blood and sweet rot. It whispered through my teeth, a sound I couldn't understand, but recognized all the same. I turned, slowly, every muscle tight. Behind me, 20 yards out, a coyote stood. But it wasn't watching me. It was watching the hollow. Ears flat, for bristled. Mouth closed. And it didn't move, not even when I met its eyes. I looked back at the tree, then down at the bone spiral. That's when I noticed the hoof print, not from a cow. Smaller, sharper, like a horse, but deeper, too deep for the weight of a regular animal. And it hadn't sunk in. It had been pressed up from beneath. I don't remember walking back. I only remember standing at the edge of my pasture an hour later, boots coated in dark dust, and the faintest vibration still humming up my legs. When I turned to shut the gate, I saw Duke. Finally, he stood just past the barn, eyes locked on mine, mouth open but silent, and on his neck, where his collar used to be, the fur had been rubbed away, as if something had held him there, pressed him still for a long, long time. That night, the power went out. Not in the house, not used the barn, the whole grid. The hills were in the ridge went black as coal, and the ranch verlander as island so sick, I could hear the good in the walls settling like breeze. I lit two oil lamps and set one near the kitchen window, the other by the front door. Neither made much difference. The flame burned low and stubborn, throwing so those that didn't much whatsoever went there. I didn't sleep, not really. Ido said sitting up in the chair by the window. Shogun across my lap, Duke kertate at my feet like Euseto when a guesapu. Vare didn't sleep either. He searched witch constantly. His breast was shallow, and his eyes never left the yard. Sometime around 3, the cows started to bellow. Short, clip sounds. Not panic, not yet, but rising. He stepped onto the porch barefoot, lantern ras, but the light going to touch the far fence. The darkness past the house didn't behave right. It had a shape, a boundary, like smoke curling around the edge of a door frame. Then Merle came galloping into the yard. The brindled cow, full speed, foam streaking her sides, always pounding the dirt like thunder. She crashed into the barn wall, shoulder fierce unbuckled, legs jerking like a fly-bitten calf. Her mouth open wide, but no sound came. You silence. A hollow kind, like her voice advanced Ulen Hapwa to her throat. Vain hair came the others. All of them, stampeding, but it wasn't wild. It wasn't chaos. They were moving in formation, tight arcs, clockwise spiders, always sinking deeper with the aspas around the yard. Not random, not scared, intentional, like they were trusting something. I tried to yell. My voice came out to Arce. I couldn't even hear it over the sound of the soybean torn beneath them. Duque vartonse, a sharp, strangled sound, anthem bolted of the porch, barking again and again, more frantic I time, until he vanished past the barn. I went after him. The moment my feet touched the ground, something shifted. I blinked, and it was morning. Used like that. No sunrise. No far from black. Used a sharp cold light and the sound of wind. The cows were gone. The yard was empty. No tracks. No broken balls were merely a heat. No blood. No sound of always retreating. Only the faint rooster of branches and the crack of the wind me turning slow. I checked the clock inside. It read 13:41 de la mañana. But outside, the sun was up. Time wasn't there right anymore. I found Duque near the hollow, curled under the burnt cottonwood. He didn't lift his head when he approached. Just looked at me with wide, fag eyes like he didn't know me, like he was listening to something he couldn't hear. And something was humming, not out loud, inside my jaw, in the bones of my cheeks. A low vibration, like when a tuning fork is struck beside your ear, but constant, and ancient. He knelt beside him and laid my hand on the ground. It was warm again. This time, the dirt pulsed, faintly, rhythmically, like a breeze under the sweat. He looked upon so that the sky badrilla changed color, not red, not gray, more like bruised milk. The clouds were wrong, tall, moving in straight lines, neat as furrows. That's when he saw the crows. Hundreds of them, silent, perched along the wire fence in a perfect row, watching. Not a single one covered, not one blinked. He turned to Duque, a west jacking. Then, with no warning, his head whipped around and started in, frantically, throwing up clouds of dark air with his paws, whining low like something inside and was desperate to get out. He tried to stop him, but with at my hand, not to hit me. Used to keep me back. And then stopped. Used froze. One paw half guaras, mostly covered in soil. And they looked up. So he looked too. The hollow had deepened overnight. Now it looked more like a goon in theirs, raw and wide. At its center, where the bones had been, a shape began to form. Not tall, not wide, used wrong, unless that didn't belong. Shadows that went toward light. A pit that didn't look dark. It looked hungry. The wind picked up again, but it didn't blow across my skin. It came from inside my mouth, pushing outward. And with it came at us, copper and something bitter, like all prayer books of booked in Sabater. The groans shook once, not like an earthquake, more like something large attacking a single step beneath me. And every hair on Duque's back stood up straight. A howl, but the sound came from beneath the ears. The sound of Duke's howl echoed without echo, like it traveled inward instead of out. The hollow didn't roar. It didn't growl. It simply opened wider without breaking soil, like it had always been there, waiting for the right time to exhale. I didn't move for a long while. The sky overhead had turned the color of scorched wool, pale but bruised, thick like smoke without fire. It didn't shift with the wind. It just hung, unmoving, above the ridge. The birds had disappeared, and the cottonwoods had begun to lean, not from weather, but as though listening to something under their roots. That's when I felt it. Not sound, not heat, a presence, ancient and unhurried, turning its attention toward me the way a sleeping thing turns toward warmth. Not eyes, but intention. Not speech, but knowing. It didn't say a word, but I understood. It had been buried here long before this land had a name, before my great-grandfather broke soil, before horses ran wild. It had waited quietly, pulsing under the crust of things, until the animals noticed, until Duke noticed. It was never cruel, never angry. It simply was. It had fed on silence, on old blood left unspoken, on secrets buried beneath fences and deeds and stone markers without names. It didn't hate me. It didn't want to hurt me, but it wanted to be remembered. The ground beneath my boots rippled again, not physically, but like a tremor in thought, a shimmer in memory. For a brief moment, I wasn't standing in the hollow. I was back in the barn, but not this morning. Years ago, it was raining hard. The night I put down the bay mare with the broken spine. I hadn't cried then. I just lit the lamp and sat beside her, hand on her neck until she stilled. She trusted me, even then. Then I was in the house by the fireplace. My wife's shawl still hung by the door, untouched since the day she left. I'd never moved it. Couldn't say why. Then the hollow again. It was offer me something. Not a deal, not a bribe. An invitation. Stay, and the land would breathe me in. I would become part of the rhythm beneath the cottonwoods. I would know the language of roots and bones and wind through rock. I would hear Duke's voice in the dirt and the hooves of the cattle, like thunder across the plains of memory. Or I could leave, break the circle, let it starve again, let the spiral close. Or I could bring it more, let it grow, let it be seen. 3 choices. Stay, leave, feed. The rifle hung heavy across my back, untouched. It felt ridiculous now, as if lead could speak to a god that dreamed beneath the clay. I looked to Duke. He wasn't digging anymore. He sat at the rim of the hollow, head bowed, eyes closed, peaceful, like he'd made his decision. I stepped into the spiral. The soil was warm, humming steady, like the land itself was breathing with me. I knelt where the bones used to be, where the pit now shimmered, and lowered my hand to the edge. And the earth answered. My heart slowed, sinking with something deeper, a rhythm older than thought. I felt the memory of rain on dry stone, of hooves pounding ancient paths long before fences, before names. I felt seen, not as a man, as a fragment, as part of a pattern I could never understand. Then I stood, walked back to the fence line in silence. Duke followed. We didn't speak, couldn't, but we knew. That night, I boarded the barn and locked every door. I took the branding iron and melted it down, poured the iron in a circle around the hearth. Not protection, just respect. A mark. The spiral didn't need sacrifice. It needed witness. The next morning, I buried the bell collar beside the cottonwood and carved nothing on the stone. Let the silence say it. Spring came early, not with thunder or bloom, but with silence, a softer one, the kind that settles over land that has been fed not by rain, but by memory. The grass grew back along the east pasture, slow at first, pale and thin, but it came steady, like it remembered how. Where the burned cottonwood once stood, a sapling pushed through the earth. Same roots, maybe not. The bark was smooth as bone, pale gray, and it didn't sway with the wind. It just stood, still and watching. The cows returned on their own. One morning I woke and found them grazing along the ridge, walking in loose circles like sleepwalkers. No breaks in the fence, no trail. They'd just come back. Merrily was among them. Her side bore a long scar I didn't recognize, shaped like a curve or crescent, half-healed and soft. She walked slow now, stared more. I didn't question it. Some things don't want answers. Duke never left my side again. He no longer barked. Not at mailmen, not at shadows, not even at thunder. But he walked the fence line each morning, sniffing, pausing, watching the horizon. When the wind changed, he'd tilt his head, then sit for long stretches like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I'd sit with him, sometimes. Just sit. Didn't need to speak. The hollow still pulsed, faint beneath the earth, like a buried heartbeat. I never went back inside it. Didn't need to. Whatever lived there or woke there didn't press against me anymore. It was content or sleeping again. Or maybe it simply knew I understood now, that I knew the rhythm. The power returned to the ranch 3 days after the storm. The lights flickered once, then held steady. But I stopped using them after dusk. Oil lamps were enough. I liked the shadows better now. They were honest. Neighbors asked if I'd seen the outage, if I'd heard what happened up north where the lines collapsed. I just nodded, told them the wind had been rough. They didn't ask twice. Folks know not to press a man whose dog looks like it's seen behind the sky. I found myself planting things that spring, not for crop or profit, just to see what the soil remembered. Wildflowers took root fast. So did sage. And one vine I didn't plant at all, black-veined, with silver leaves that shimmered under moonlight. It clung to the fence post closest to the hollow, growing slow, always in a spiral. The earth was different now. Not cursed, not healed, just awake. And me, I was slower too. Not broken, just quieter. I spent more time walking the land without purpose, hand on Duke's head, feeling the air shift beneath my ribs. I didn't write anything down, didn't need to mark the days. The seasons took care of that. One morning, before sunrise, I saw something in the field, not a figure, not an animal, just a shape where there shouldn't have been one, a shimmer in the fog like heat on stone, forming the rough outline of something tall. It didn't move, didn't beckon. It watched. I raised a hand, not a wave, not a warning, just acknowledgement. It faded like dew. Some stories aren't for telling. Some truths belong to the soil. The last thing I did before the rains came was walk the fence one final time. Duke beside me, wind steady, the sky soft with evening. Near the east edge, where the grass grows darkest and thickest, a single blossom had bloomed, pale red, twisted petals, curling in on themselves like a question. I knelt beside it. The earth was warm, not sun-warm, remembering. I left it untouched. Let speak in silence. And when I turned for home, Duke looked up at me, and I swear, just for a moment, his eyes were full of stars.